My name is Jennifer Malinsky, and this is my persuasive speech for Intro to Public Speaking with Angela Westfall. I'll be doing my topic on whether or not video games are bad for children. Children nowadays are more plugged in than ever. Digital media, such as computers and video games, are a huge part of everyday life, and the constant exposure seems to be extremely detrimental. I think that the constant exposure to violence and the quote-unquote reward process for violent responses in video games teaches an unhealthy lesson on how kids are expected to act in normal day-to-day activities. Those things aside, I also think that all the extra time spent parked in front of the television and or the computer is a huge contributing factor to the increases in childhood obesity and its related long-term health complications. I also feel that the more time children spend in the isolating world of video games inhibits their ability to learn proper social interaction, a crucial life skill they will need long into adulthood. With childhood obesity and its related health problems on the rise, in addition to increases in aggressive and violent behaviors in children and adolescents, is there a connection to the increased amount of time that kids spend parked in front of the proverbial electronic babysitters? Children nowadays are exposed to digital media starting at a much younger age than ever. 6-year-olds have to teach their parents how to connect video game consoles to the television, and one has to wonder if the prevalence of digital media at such a crucial developmental stage is healthy. Heavy on the violence and loaded with advertising that seems to glorify an unhealthy lifestyle, is it any question as to whether or not video games are bad for our kids? While there are some studies that indicate there are some benefits to video game play, such as the coordination and development of eye-hand coordination, there are far more that indicate that the sedentary lifestyle encouraged by video games have far more wide-reaching negative effects. On average, 8 to 18-year-olds in the U.S. spend an average of 7.5 hours per day using some form of digital media such as computer or console-based video games. Currently, 1/3 of all children and adolescents in the U.S. are also overweight or even obese, and as they get older, they begin to suffer from the additional detrimental health problems of their obesity, such as type 2 diabetes and or hypertension. Years ago, before the wide-scale integration of digital media in day-to-day life, you didn't see the problems such as childhood obesity and diabetes that you see now. In my own house, the video game system was reserved for days when the weather was too bad to play outside. The long-term effects of those problems can now follow children well into their adulthood and will most likely be the cause of them dying at younger ages. The development of eye-hand coordination is a concern for parents. There are plenty of other social activities that could be incorporated into their child's life, such as sports. Activities that encourage not just the development of these fine motor skills, but also encourage social involvement and physical activity, both of which should automatically be integrated into childhood. The structure and rules of team sports teach children about fair play and following rules, in addition to the obvious health benefits of physical activity. Children who engage in activities that encourage social interaction, such as Boy and Girl Scouts or sports, tend to have better grades in school. They also tend to have fewer problem behaviors, such as excessive violence and bullying, and better social skills than children who spend time playing video games. This point seems to almost prove the displacement hypothesis, which states that time spent using digital media reduces the time spent doing homework, studying, reading, and engaging in intellectually stimulating conversation. And while that theory was originally written in 1999 and didn't mention video games specifically, it can be safely inferred that with the constant technological advances of digital media, including video games, their popularity can only have increased with time. Indeed, characters of popular video games are nearly as prevalent in pop culture as live actors and actresses. The violent and bloody content of video games, especially at the higher or mature levels, raises arousal levels, as well as feelings of hostility, which may lead to more aggressive behavior, such as the bullying of peers or getting into physical altercations. Extended exposure to the violence in video games instills the belief that violent responses are not only okay, but they are encouraged and rewarded. Another point to consider with regards to violent content in video games is the desensitization theory. This theory, which states that while humans have an instinctive aversion to blood, gore, and violence, with regular exposure to those things, the negative responses dissipate. Complementing that is the social learning theory, which says that regular exposure to violence may lead to imitation, and that the interactive nature of video games makes imitation that much more likely. Interestingly, girls are more likely to choose intellectually stimulating games, while boys tend to show a preference for violent ones. These points also seem to correlate with the sudden increase in incidents such as school shootings, a phenomenon that was almost completely non-existent until fairly recently in history. Residents of the town of Sandy Hook, the site of a disastrous school massacre in 2012, actually did a collection to rid neighboring towns of violent video games. While the games themselves may not be directly to blame, that incident at least comes to show that there is an increasing level of social awareness as to the potentially detrimental effects of constantly being exposed to and on some level interacting in a violence-driven lifestyle. In conclusion, I feel like the wide-ranging negative effects of video game play, from the impacts on children's health to the potential for increased aggressive and violent behavior, far outweigh the tenuous positives. I think that children benefit more from interacting with peer groups and family members in group activities rather than in the self-isolating world of video gaming. References for this speech came from a few different sources. I quoted out of an article, Digital Gaming and Pediatric Obesity at the Intersection of Science and Social Policy, Social Issues and Policy Review. That was from 2012. I also quoted out of an article from the International Journal of Psychology, a biosocial approach called Video Gameplay and Extracurricular Activities on Parent-Perceived Socio-Emotional Functioning in Children and Adolescents. And I also quoted out of an article from 2009 called Young Children's Video and Computer Game Use, Relations with School Performance and Behavior. Thank you very much.